There was once a beautiful woman named Sandra who lived in a village called Nnefolktales, a peaceful place surrounded by green hills and flowing rivers. Nnefolktales was known far and wide for its beauty, but nothing in the village was as stunning as Sandra. She was so beautiful that men from every corner of the land came to see her. Her skin glowed like the morning sun, her eyes shined like stars, and her smile could light up the darkest night. Mothers pointed her out to their daughters, saying, "Be like Sandra." Fathers looked at her and said, "She will marry a great man one day." But Sandra had a secret that no one knew. Once a year, without fail, she would release a fart so powerful that it could shake the earth. It was no ordinary fart. It was as loud as a thunderstorm and as smelly as a rotten carcass. Every living thing in the village, including men, women, and children, could be driven out by the smell when it arrived. The villagers had no idea about this dark secret because Sandra always disappeared just before it happened. When the time was near, Sandra would pack her things and quietly leave the village, walking to the next village or deep into the forest where no one knew her. She would wait for the fart to come, endure its effects alone, and then return home once the stench had passed. The villagers always thought she was visiting friends or relatives, and no one ever questioned her sudden trips. As the years passed, the young men of Nnefolktales grew more and more determined to win Sandra's heart. They came with gifts of yams, goats, and cows, offering her the best of what they had. Some offered to build her a house, others promised riches, and many more swore their undying love for her beauty. But Sandra turned them all away. The villagers began to wonder why. "Why does she refuse every man who asks for her hand?" they asked. "Is she waiting for a king? Or is there something wrong with her?" The women of the village, too, were confused. Sandra's mother often sat with her in the evenings, asking why she rejected all the fine men who came to propose to her. Sandra would simply smile and say, "The time isn't right." But she knew deep down that her annual fart was the reason she was never able to marry. What man would want to stay with a woman whose fart could empty a village? The men, however, were not easily discouraged. Every month more suitors came to Sandra's door, and every month she found new ways to turn them down. There was Kwame the fisherman, who promised to catch the biggest fish in the river just for her. Then came Kofi the trader, offering her fine clothes from distant lands. Even Yor the farmer, who swore to present the best fields for her, couldn't sway her decision. Despite her refusals, there was one man who did not give up. His name was Cojo. He was a quiet man, not wealthy like the others, but hard-working and kind. Cojo didn't come to Sandra with gifts of riches or promises of a grand future. Instead, he simply sat outside her house every day, carving small wooden figures and singing quietly to himself. He never boasted about what he could offer her, and he never asked her for anything. At first, Sandra gave him no attention. She thought he would leave like all the others. But day after day, Cojo returned, always sitting in the same spot, carving and singing. Slowly, she began to notice him. He was different from the rest. He was patient, calm, and not eager to win her over with empty promises. She found herself growing fond of his quiet presence. As time went on, Sandra realized that she liked Cojo. He didn't pressure her like the other men, and she began to look forward to seeing him each day. But still, she kept her distance, knowing that her secret could ruin everything. She couldn't imagine how he would react if he ever found out about the yearly fart. One evening, as the sun was setting, Cojo looked up and spoke to Sandra for the first time. His voice was gentle, and he told her that he cared for her deeply. He didn't ask for her hand in marriage like the others. Instead, he simply expressed his feelings, hoping she would understand. Sandra felt her heart soften, but fear still gripped her. She couldn't tell him the truth, at least not yet. Just as things seemed to be going well between them, Sandra felt the familiar rumble in her stomach. It was almost time for her annual fart, and she knew she had to leave the village before it happened. Without a word, she packed her things and left, heading toward the neighboring village where she could release the fart without anyone knowing. Cojo, however, wasn't like the other men. When he saw that Sandra had left suddenly, he became concerned. He had noticed her strange habit of leaving the village once a year, and this time he decided to follow her. He walked through the night, following the path she had taken, determined to find out why she always disappeared. After a long journey, Cojo found Sandra sitting alone by a large baobab tree in the neighboring village. He approached her quietly, not wanting to scare her. When Sandra saw him, she was shocked. No one had ever followed her before. She didn't know how to explain her situation, but Cojo's presence made it clear that she could no longer hide the truth. As she sat under the tree, Sandra realized she couldn't keep her secret from Cojo any longer. The fart was coming, and there was no stopping it. She told Cojo everything, including her yearly fart and how it had the power to drive everyone away. She explained that this was why she always left the village and why she could never accept any suitors. Cojo listened carefully, and when she had finished, he remained quiet for a moment. Sandra braced herself for his reaction, expecting him to run away in horror. But Cojo surprised her. Instead of fleeing, he stayed by her side, accepting her secret as part of who she was. He didn't laugh, nor did he seem disgusted. The next moment, it happened. With a sound that shook the very earth, Sandra's fart escaped. The air filled with a stench so terrible that even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Birds flew from the trees, animals scattered, and for miles around, the land fell silent as if a shadow had befallen on it. But Cojo, though his eyes watered from the smell, didn't move. He simply sat beside Sandra, enduring the stench with a calm smile. Sandra, for the first time in years, felt relieved. She had feared this moment her entire life, yet here was a man who didn't run away from her, even after witnessing the horror of her fart. It was then that she realized Cojo was different from all the others. He had stayed, even when others would have run. Together, they walked back to the village, hand in hand. When they returned, the villagers were shocked to see them together. Word of Sandra's yearly fart spread quickly, and soon the entire village was laughing about it. What had once been a terrible secret was now a story told with humor and affection. From that day on, Sandra no longer had to hide her secret. She and Cojo were married, and every year when the time for her annual fart came, the villagers would gather for what they called the Great Fart Festival. They would celebrate with food, music, and laughter, embracing Sandra's unique gift with joy. And so, Sandra lived happily with Cojo, knowing that she no longer needed to hide who she truly was. The village of Nnefolktales, once quiet and peaceful, became known not only for its beauty but also for its yearly celebration of laughter, love, and, of course, the legendary fart.